In the quiet haze of early 20th century America, where the boundaries between science and mysticism blurred like mist over a southern dawn, there emerged a figure whose words would echo through the corridors of spiritual inquiry for generations. Edgar Cayce, known to many as the Sleeping Prophet, did not speak from pulpits or lecture halls, but from the depths of a self-induced trance, a state where his consciousness seemed to dissolve into the vast akashic records of time itself. His voice, though soft, carried the weight of forgotten truths, as if he were not merely recounting visions, but channeling the whispers of souls long departed. To those who listened, he was more than a man. He was a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a conduit through which the mysteries of the afterlife flowed with unsettling clarity. Unlike the dogmatic certainties of his era, Cayce's revelations were fluid, often paradoxical, painting reincarnation not as a rigid cycle of human rebirth, but as a tapestry of consciousness woven across kingdoms, both visible and hidden. His readings, meticulously documented by stenographers as he lay in repose, spoke of souls that did not ascend into the light, nor linger in the astral planes, but instead descended, sometimes within the span of a single hour after death, into forms far removed from their human origins. This was not the reincarnation of Eastern philosophies, nor the linear judgment of Abrahamic traditions. It was something far more enigmatic, a spiritual detour, a temporary embodiment in the animal kingdom, driven by forces as ancient as instinct itself. Historical accounts of Cayce's work reveal a man who never claimed to understand the full scope of what he transmitted. He was, in his own words, merely a channel, a vessel for truths that transcended his personal beliefs. Yet the consistency of his readings, over 14,000 in his lifetime, lends an eerie authority to his claims. Among the most haunting were those describing souls tethered to earth by unresolved burdens, their vibrations too dense to rise, too restless to remain. Some, he said, were drawn back by the magnetic pull of unfinished lessons, their consciousness fragmenting into instinctual forms, a wolf's howl carrying the echo of a warrior's unresolved rage, or a bird's flight mirroring the unfulfilled longing of a poet's truncated life. What does it mean for a soul to return so swiftly, not as a human, but as an animal? Cayce's readings suggest it is neither punishment nor regression, but a profound recalibration, a stripping away of the intellectual ego to confront the raw essence of existence. Here, in the silent gaze of a deer, or the relentless hunt of a predator, the soul encounters the primal forces it once sought to master in human form. And yet, the question lingers, suspended in the space between his words and our understanding. If consciousness can descend so quickly, what does that reveal about the true nature of death, and the urgency of the lessons we leave unlearned? Let this be the threshold of our inquiry. As we step deeper into Cayce's forgotten teachings, consider this. The soul's journey is not always a climb. Sometimes it is a descent, a voluntary surrender to the earthly currents that shape all life. And in that surrender, perhaps, lies the key to its eventual ascent. In the shadowed recesses of Edgar Cayce's readings, there exists a revelation so profound that it challenges the very foundations of how humanity perceives the soul's passage beyond the veil. For while many spirits ascend into realms of rest or preparation before their next incarnation, Cayce spoke of those rare, almost fleeting transitions, where a soul still resonating with the echoes of its earthly struggles, returns not in decades, but within the span of a single hour. This is not a journey dictated by the natural rhythms of reincarnation, but an urgent, nearly instantaneous descent, often into forms far removed from the human experience. The parameters of such a phenomenon, as Cayce described, are bound to the unresolved vibrations of the soul itself. When a life concludes under the weight of deep, unmastered instincts, be they primal fears, unchecked desires, or the lingering pull of attachments, these energies do not dissipate with the final breath. Instead, they coalesce into a spiritual gravity, tethering the soul to the physical plane with an intensity that defies the usual cycles of transition. Cayce's readings suggest that these souls are not punished, but rather compelled, drawn back by the magnetic force of lessons left unfinished, emotions left untransmuted, or karmic debts still demanding resolution. The urgency of their return is a testament to the soul's own desperation, a cosmic correction imposed by the laws of spiritual equilibrium. Historical accounts from Cayce's trance states reveal that such immediate reincarnations often occur when a soul has become entangled in the lower frequencies of existence, where instinct overshadows reason and survival eclipses evolution. In these cases, the soul may find itself not in the womb of a human mother, but within the embryonic pulse of an animal, its consciousness temporarily veiled by the limitations of a form that mirrors its unresolved state. Cayce framed this not as a regression but as a necessary simplification, a stripping away of human complexity to confront, in raw and unfiltered terms, the very essence of what held it back. Yet, what does this reveal about the nature of the soul's journey? If consciousness can descend so swiftly, so radically, then the boundaries between human and animal, spirit and instinct, become far more fluid than tradition allows. Cayce's teachings imply that the soul is not confined to a single path of ascent, but may weave through existence in ways that defy linear understanding, each return, no matter how brief or humble in form, serving as a crucible for purification. And so, one must pause to consider, if the soul can be called back in the blink of an eye, what does that say about the lessons we dismiss in life? What instincts do we feed that might one day anchor us not to the stars, but to the earth beneath our feet? The mystery deepens and the invitation remains, to peer beyond the surface of existence, and ask what within us is still wild enough to return. And so we arrive at one of Edgar Cayce's most enigmatic revelations, the rare and fleeting passage of a soul into the body of an animal, not across the span of centuries, but within the space of a single hour after death. Here the boundaries of human understanding blur, for Cayce did not speak of this as mere folklore or symbolic metaphor, but as a tangible, if extraordinary, expression of spiritual mechanics. The question arises, what compels a soul, freshly liberated from its human vessel, to descend once more into the physical, not as a child, a sage, or a laborer, but as a creature of instinct, bound to the earth in an entirely different form? The answer lies in the vibration of consciousness itself. Cayce's readings suggest that when a soul carries unresolved discord, whether from unmastered lessons, unchecked passions, or a profound dissonance between its higher purpose and its earthly actions, it may find itself drawn back by an almost magnetic force. Yet, unlike the deliberate reincarnation into human life, this return is not a choice made in the halls of the Akashic records, but a consequence of spiritual gravity. The soul, still tethered to the material plane by threads of karma or unrefined energy, seeks the nearest vessel capable of housing its remaining vibrations. And in some cases, that vessel is not human at all. Consider the nature of the animal kingdom. It is a realm of pure instinct, of survival and simplicity, yet also of profound lessons in trust, loyalty, and the unfiltered expression of existence. Cayce hinted that a soul might temporarily inhabit such a form not as punishment, but as a corrective, a means to experience, through the unadulterated lens of an animal, the very qualities it failed to integrate in human life. A soul that struggled with aggression may find itself in the body of a predator, forced to confront the raw essence of its own unresolved fury. Another, burdened by an inability to love unconditionally, might return as a creature of devotion, a dog, perhaps, to learn through pure wordless affection what it means to give without expectation. Yet this phenomenon is not without its paradoxes. For if consciousness is the architect of its own destiny, how does one reconcile the idea of a soul, even momentarily, surrendering its higher faculties to the instincts of a beast? Cayce's readings suggest that the experience is not one of regression, but of distillation, a stripping away of the intellectual and emotional layers that once clouded its understanding. In the silence of an animal's mind, the soul may finally hear the lessons it once resisted. And so we must ask, what does it mean for us, still clothed in human form, to consider that our own unmastered energies could one day shape our return to this world? If the soul's journey is indeed a spiral, ever ascending, yet sometimes circling back, what might we learn from those who walk beside us on four legs, or fly above us on wings, or swim beneath the surfaces we cannot see? Could it be that in their eyes we glimpse not just the reflection of our own humanity, but the echoes of souls still finding their way home? In the shadowed corridors of Edgar Cayce's readings, there lies a revelation both haunting and profound, one that speaks to the unseen currents guiding a soul's descent into form. In such cases, the descent into animal form is not a regression, but a simplification, a return to the fundamental frequencies of existence, where the soul can rebuild its harmony. The wolf that howls at the moon may carry the remnants of a human voice that once cried out in isolation. The bird that takes flight could be a spirit learning. At last, the weightlessness of surrender. Each form is a mirror, reflecting back the lessons the soul refused to see in human guise. And so one must ask, what of our own vibrations? What unresolved currents move within us, unseen yet potent enough to shape not just this life, but the next? Cayce's teachings do not demand fear, but awareness, a recognition that every emotion left unexamined, every lesson left unlearned, is a thread still tugging at the fabric of our spiritual journey. The animal soul is not lost, it is recalibrating, and in that recalibration lies a question for us all. What would it take to release what no longer serves us, before the next life chooses our form for us? What transpires when a soul, still humming with the echoes of human longing, descends into the body of an animal? Edgar Cayce's readings suggest that such a transition is not mere chance, but a deliberate, if fleeting, expression of unresolved vibration. Here the earthly realm becomes both a classroom and a mirror, where the instincts of the animal form reflect the unhealed fragments of a human past. To understand this interaction is to glimpse the hidden threads connecting consciousness across species, and to question whether the creatures that cross our paths might carry more than we perceive. Consider the soul that in life was bound by fear, its decisions dictated by survival rather than growth. Cayce's readings imply that upon death, if the lesson remains unlearned, the consciousness may gravitate toward an animal whose existence is defined by that very instinct. A timid soul, for instance, might return as a prey animal, its heightened senses and constant vigilance, forcing it to confront the same primal anxieties it once avoided in human form. The irony is profound. What was once a psychological burden becomes a physical necessity, the soul's unresolved emotion now woven into the fabric of its new existence. Here, the animal's behavior is not mere instinct. It is the residue of a human story still seeking resolution. Documented cases, though rare, offer haunting glimpses of this phenomenon. In one account from the Cayce archives, a woman who had spent her life suppressing grief reported recurring dreams of a black crow that watched her from a distance. After her passing, her family observed an unusually tame crow lingering near her gravesite for weeks, its cries eerily mimicking the cadence of her voice. Cayce's reading on the matter suggested the soul had not yet released its sorrow, and in the crow's form, it sought both expression and closure. The bird's behavior, its reluctance to fly, its fixation on reflective surfaces, mirrored the woman's lifelong struggle with self-confrontation. Such anecdotes compel us to ask, how often do we dismiss the peculiar habits of animals as coincidence, when they may be the silent language of a soul still learning? Yet this interaction is not one-sided. The earthly realm, Cayce taught, is a shared tapestry of energy, where human and animal consciousness intersect in ways we scarcely comprehend. A soul reincarnated as an animal does not merely relive its past, it influences the living, often in subtle but profound ways. The loyal dog that seems to understand human sorrow, the horse that carries its rider through danger with uncanny intuition, could these be more than trained behaviors? Cayce's readings hint that animals serving as temporary vessels for human souls may retain traces of their former wisdom, offering guidance or comfort to those still bound by the same lessons they once faced. In this light, every encounter with an animal becomes a potential meeting of spirits, a silent exchange of unfinished stories. To ponder this is to stand at the threshold of a radical truth, that life and death are not linear but cyclic, and that the soul's journey may weave through forms we have yet to fully honor. If Cayce's insights hold weight, then the next time an animal's gaze lingers upon you a moment too long, consider what it might be trying to remember or what it is asking you to forget. For in the quiet rustle of feathers, the steady pad of paws, or the mournful howl at dusk, there may lie the echoes of a soul still finding its way home. There exists, within the quiet gaze of an animal, a depth often unacknowledged, a silent knowing that transcends the boundaries of species. Edgar Cayce's readings suggest that this connection is not merely sentimental, but spiritual, that the souls of human beings in their restless journey toward evolution may at times descend into the animal kingdom, not as punishment, but as a profound and necessary passage. To understand this is to recognize that the line between human and animal is not fixed, but fluid, a sacred thread woven through the tapestry of consciousness itself. Cayce, quote, "As philosophy reveals an interconnectedness that challenges the illusion of separation." He spoke of souls drawn to animal forms, not by chance, but by resonance, those whose unresolved emotions, unlearned lessons, or unfulfilled purposes find temporary expression in the instinctual wisdom of beasts. A dog's unwavering loyalty may echo a past life's vow of devotion left unhonored. The fierce protectiveness of a mother bear could carry the imprint of a human spirit still learning the boundaries of love and possession. Even the fleeting presence of a bird, alighting on a windowsill, might be a soul pausing to whisper a forgotten truth to those who will listen. This perspective does not diminish the sanctity of human life, rather it expands it. If we allow ourselves to consider that the animals who cross our paths may be more than mere creatures, if we dare to see them as vessels of ancient wisdom, as teachers in disguise, then every encounter becomes an invitation. The stray cat that lingers at one's doorstep, the horse that refuses to leave a grieving rider's side, the crow that watches with unsettling intelligence. Could these be souls we have known? Could they be mirrors, reflecting back to us the lessons we ourselves have yet to master? To embrace this possibility is to walk the earth with a heightened reverence. It is to look into the eyes of a creature and ask not with words, but with the heart, "What have you come to remind me of?" Cayce's readings imply that these connections are not accidental, but sacred contracts, opportunities for both the human and the animal to evolve in tandem. And if this is so, then compassion takes on a new dimension. The way we treat animals ceases to be a matter of ethics alone. It becomes a dialogue with the soul's own journey, a recognition that in caring for them, we may very well be tending to fragments of our own unfinished stories. Let this understanding settle within you like a quiet revelation. The next time an animal crosses your path, whether wild or domesticated, pause. Observe not just its behavior, but the energy it carries. Is there a familiarity in its presence, a lesson in its gaze? The world is far more alive with meaning than we have been taught to see. And if Cayce's visions hold even a fraction of truth, then love, in all its forms, is the bridge that connects every living thing across the vast and mysterious cycles of existence. And so the question lingers, not as a whisper, but as a tremor through the foundations of belief. If, as Edgar Cayce suggested, the soul may descend into the form of an animal within the span of a single hour after death, what then becomes of the unspoken covenant between humanity and the creatures with which it shares the earth? The implications stretch far beyond the metaphysical, seeping into the very fabric of society, ethics, and the silent contracts that govern how one life regards another. Consider, for a moment, the weight of this knowledge upon the collective conscience. Conventional doctrines, whether religious, philosophical, or scientific, have long drawn a stark division between human and animal, ascribing to the former an exclusivity of spirit, of divine spark. But Cayce's readings dissolve such boundaries with unsettling grace. They propose that the animal before us may not merely be a companion or a resource, but a vessel, temporary though it may be, for a consciousness once clad in human thought, now navigating the raw, unfiltered lessons of instinct. What does it mean to look into the eyes of a creature and wonder, is this a soul in transition? The realization does not demand worship, but it does demand reverence. And reverence, history has shown, is the precursor to revolution. The shift would not be instantaneous, nor would it be uniform. Yet one can trace its potential unfolding in the quiet transformations of those who dare to entertain the possibility. A farmer pausing before the slaughter might hesitate, not out of sentimentality, but from the dawning suspicion that the life before him carries a story older than its flesh. A hunter tracking prey through the underbrush could find the act recast not as conquest, but as an encounter with a fellow traveler, however fleeting their form. Even the most urban among us, glancing at a stray dog or a pigeon on a windowsill, might feel the faintest pull of recognition, as though the universe had left a breadcrumb of meaning in an otherwise ordinary moment. This is the alchemy of Cayce's insight. It does not merely inform, it transmutes. For if the soul's journey is fluid enough to traverse the kingdoms of life, then the moral framework that justifies domination, exploitation, or indifference begins to crack under its own weight. The question ceases to be, what are they? And becomes, who might they have been? Or, more profoundly, who might they yet become? Such a perspective does not erase the realities of survival, of ecosystems in balance, of the necessary cycles of predator and prey, but it does infuse them with a layer of sacredness, a reminder that every life, no matter how brief or seemingly humble, may be a chapter in a far grander narrative. And what of justice, then? If the soul's evolution is not linear, but a spiral, dipping at times into forms that speak not in words but in growls, in songs, in silent endurance, how does humanity reconcile its laws, its hierarchies, its very notion of fairness? The courts of man do not try animals for crimes, nor do they grant them rights commensurate with human dignity. But Cayce's vision suggests that dignity is not a human invention. It is a cosmic principle woven into the fabric of existence itself. To harm without cause, to exploit without gratitude, to dominate without reverence. These acts may not only wound the creature before us, but disrupt the unseen currents of a soul's passage. Let this understanding settle, then, not as a burden, but as an invitation. The next time you meet the gaze of an animal, whether wild, domesticated, or bound for the market, allow yourself to linger in the space between certainty and mystery. Ask what lessons its presence might hold, not just for its own kind, but for the part of you that has also known struggle, transformation, and the silent yearning to be seen. For in that moment of pause, of curiosity, of unspoken acknowledgement, you are not merely observing another life. You are participating in the ancient unbroken dialogue between souls. And that perhaps is the first step toward a world where compassion is not an ideal but an instinct. They say the past is a foreign country, yet when one traces the thread of Edgar Cayce's revelations through the tapestry of contemporary spiritual thought, the landscape feels eerily familiar. Though the language has shifted, the questions remain. Where Cayce spoke of souls descending into animal form within the space of an hour, today's metaphysical traditions whisper of walk-ins, starseeds, and the oversoul's fractals, each a variation on the theme of consciousness unbound by time or species. But how closely do these modern interpretations align with the sleeping prophet's warnings? And what do they reveal about humanity's evolving relationship with the creatures we share this earth with? In the East, the concept of jiva, the individual soul, has long been understood to traverse the samsaric wheel, not as a linear ascent, but as a spiral that may at times circle back through non-human vessels. Hindu and Buddhist texts speak of pretas, restless spirits caught between realms, or tyriaks, souls temporarily housed in animal bodies as karmic penance. The Tibetan bardo Thodol even describes the moment of death as a crossroads where the unready soul, bewildered by its own attachments, might grasp at the first available form, be it beast or bird. Here Cayce's hour-long window finds resonance. Both traditions acknowledge that the transition is not always a measured, deliberate choice, but sometimes a desperate lunge toward the familiar. Yet where Cayce framed this descent as a temporary imbalance, many New Age interpretations romanticize it, casting animal incarnation as a noble choice, a soul's voluntary service to the planet's collective healing. The divergence is stark. One speaks of urgency and unresolved burden, the other of cosmic altruism. Meanwhile, the West's spiritual landscape has grown increasingly fractured. Indigenous traditions, from the Lakota belief in Nagila, the life force that flows through all beings, to the Celtic reverence for shape-shifting ancestors, have always honored the fluidity between human and animal spirits. Yet, in modern esoteric circles, the idea of reincarnating as an animal is often met with resistance, as if the very suggestion undermines humanity's perceived supremacy. Here lies the tension. Cayce's readings imply that such a fate is not a demotion, but a recalibration, a soul's attempt to master instincts it once let rule it. Contemporary animal rights movements, ironically, reflect this unconscious truth. The vegan who weeps for factory-farmed cows, the conservationist fighting to save the last white rhinos, are they not, in some way, sensing the sacred contract Cayce described? That these beings might be more than mere creatures, but kin in a cycle we've only begun to remember. And yet, for all the parallels, a chasm remains. Cayce's visions carry a weight of consequence. The soul that returns too swiftly, he warned, risks prolonging its own confusion, mistaking the body's instincts for the spirit's wisdom. Today's spiritual marketplace, by contrast, often frames such experiences as evolutionary leaps, stripping them of their cautionary edge. The danger then is not in the belief itself, but in the forgetting that the animal kingdom is not a playground for advanced souls, but a mirror, one that reflects back the lessons we refuse to learn the first time. Bedatsation. So one must ask, if Cayce's hour of reckoning is real, what does it demand of us now? To look into the eyes of a wolf, a whale, a stray dog, and wonder not just what they are, but who they have been. And in that wondering, to treat the earth not as a stage for humanity's drama, but as a shared sanctuary, where every life, no matter its form, is a verse in the same ancient hymn. The next time you hear the cry of a crow at dusk, or feel the gaze of a horse in a field, pause, and consider perhaps it is not their soul you are sensing, but the echo of your own dot. And so the soul journeys, not in a straight line, but in spirals of experience, each turn revealing deeper layers of its own becoming. Edgar Cayce's readings suggest that the spirit does not merely pass through lives as a passive observer, but as an active architect of its own evolution. Each incarnation, whether in human form or another, is a deliberate stroke upon the canvas of consciousness, a chance to refine, to correct, or to awaken. Yet what happens when the soul, still heavy with unresolved vibrations, finds itself drawn back to the earthly plane within the space of an hour? What does it mean when the next vessel is not one of reason, but of instinct? Cayce's visions speak of a profound urgency in the soul's maturation. A life lived in human form is not a guarantee of progress. It is an opportunity, a fleeting moment in the grand cycle where the spirit may either ascend toward greater understanding or become entangled in the very patterns it sought to transcend. The rare cases of immediate reincarnation into animal form, he implied, were not punishments, but reflections of a consciousness still bound by primal forces, unfinished lessons that could not yet be released. The animal kingdom, in this light, becomes a temporary classroom, where the soul must confront the raw essence of survival, of loyalty, of unspoken connection to the earth. It is a humbling descent, a stripping away of the intellectual veils that often obscure the deeper truths of existence. But the question lingers, what of our own journeys? If the soul is indeed a traveler through countless forms, then every moment of this life is a crossroads. The choices made today, the compassion extended, the fears confronted, the wisdom sought, are the seeds of tomorrow's incarnation. Cayce's readings warn against complacency, against the illusion that spiritual growth is a passive unfolding. The soul does not drift, it chooses, and in each choice it either lightens its burden or deepens its karmic ties. Consider, then the weight of your own steps upon this path. Are there lessons you have deferred, truths you have avoided, or instincts you have yet to master? The soul's evolution is not measured in lifetimes alone, but in the courage to face what each one demands. For those who listen closely, the whispers of past existences echo in the present, urging, always urging, toward the next ascent. The question is not whether the soul will return, but how. And in that how lies the difference between repetition and transformation. And so the readings of Edgar Cayce draw to a close, not with finality, but with the quiet resonance of a truth half glimpsed, half remembered. For what they reveal is not merely the fate of souls that descend into the animal kingdom within the space of an hour, but the deeper architecture of consciousness itself, a living, breathing tapestry, where every thread, no matter how humble, serves the grand design of spiritual evolution. Cayce's visions do not present these transitions as punishments, nor as mere curiosities of the cosmic order, but as profound expressions of the soul's unyielding drive toward balance. When a consciousness, still vibrating with the weight of unresolved instinct or unmastered lesson, finds itself drawn back to earth in non-human form, it is not a descent into lesser being. It is the universe's way of offering another classroom, another lens through which to refine the essence of what it means to be. The reasons behind such rapid returns are as varied as the souls themselves. Some are bound by karmic echoes too dense to dissolve in the brief interlude between lives, their energies still tangled in the physical plane's magnetic pull. Others may choose, however unconsciously, this path as a form of sacred service, their higher selves recognizing that the simplicity of an animal's existence could teach what a human lifetime could not, the purity of instinct unclouded by ego, the wisdom of presence unburdened by time. And for a rare few, Cayce suggests it is a corrective measure, a temporary sojourn to recalibrate a spirit that has strayed too far from the harmony of its original blueprint. Yet in every case, the underlying current remains the same. The soul is never static. It is always moving, always seeking, always stretching toward the light, even when the path it takes is one we might not expect. What then does this mean for the human spirit? It asks us to expand our understanding of reincarnation beyond the linear, beyond the assumption that progress must always wear a human face. It invites us to consider that growth is not a ladder, but a spiral, one that may circle back upon itself in unexpected forms, each revolution deepening the wisdom carved into the soul's memory. And perhaps most radically, it challenges us to see the animal kingdom not as separate from our own journey, but as a mirror, a companion in the great work of becoming. The deer that pauses at the edge of the forest, the crow that watches with knowing eyes, they may be more than creatures. They may be fellow travelers, wearing temporary disguises, just as we do. So let this be the question that lingers as the narrative fades. What if the boundaries between us and the rest of life are not walls but thresholds? What if the soul's journey is not a solitary climb, but a dance, a sacred exchange of energy and insight across all kingdoms of existence? Cayce's readings do not demand belief, they ask only for contemplation. For in the quiet spaces between his words, there is room to wonder, to feel the pulse of something older and wiser than dogma. And perhaps, in that wondering, we begin to sense the truth he pointed toward again and again, that death is not an end, but a transformation. That every life, no matter its form, is a verse in the same eternal poem. Carry this with you, then, not as a conclusion, but as an invitation. The next time you meet the gaze of an animal, pause, look deeper, and ask yourself, what lesson might this soul be learning? What lesson might it in turn be offering to me? For in the recognition of our shared journey we honor the mystery, and in honoring the mystery we draw closer to the heart of all things.